population is 235,000 people, the 84th city in Russia, 26 kilometers from the border with Ukraine, 1,000 kilometers from Moscow. It has a warm climate, winters are typically above 0 degrees centigrade and summers are dry. Coal was extracted here for many years. Now most of the mines have already been closed due to the unprofitability of mining this rock. But this film is not about coal or a warm climate. A man you know well came here in 1978. He lived here for 12 years and made this region famous, not only locally, but also throughout the whole world. Americans will make a lot of horror movies about him, and most of the city's residents will remember this person, and they will tell you that they do not want or cannot talk about him. This is the Shahty city. Here, Andrei Chikatilo killed. This man is not worthy of being talked about in this film. He is not worthy of being talked about anywhere at all. But in this story, there were people whose mistakes allowed such a monstrous atrocity to take place for more than 10 years. Chikatilo could not be caught for 12 years. According to official data, he killed 52 people. According to unofficial data, many more. The word killed does not fit the description of what he did to people. More suitable words are torn and tormented, taking of body parts. He moved here in 1978 and got a job as a teacher at a local high school. But a few years earlier, he had already been dismissed from a school for harassing 2 female students. They dismissed him without notifying the authorities. This is the first human error. Why didn't they write a statement to the police? Why didn't they bring this case to law? It does not matter how serious the offence. Everywhere in any country, any police investigating sexual crimes will first check for those who have a conviction for a similar crime. Later, he buys this house, and on December the 22nd, 1978, he kills his first victim, a girl of 9 years old, and throws the girl's body here into the Grushevska River, 100 meters from his house. The next day, the body will be found a few dozen meters from here. The unprecedented, audacious murder of a minor has stirred up the public, and Chikatilo should have been the first on the list of suspects because he was the owner of a house that was located 100 meters from the place where the body was found. begins the diabolical, inexplicable look of the worst maniac of the 20th century. Next door lived Alexander Kravchenko, previously convicted of a similar charge for the rape and murder of a minor. He was arrested, tortured lengthily, forced to confess, and then executed. Only more than 10 years after Chikatilo's arrest, Kravchenko's sentence was overturned. This is the second human error, or rather the error of the entire system. An instruction was issued. In order for the people not to rebel, the crime must be solved quickly. Later in the case file, information also emerges that in addition to the torture that forced Kravchenko to confess, the victim's belongings were planted in his house. Additionally, the conviction was secured with the testimony of his wife, who was forced to give the evidence necessary for the conviction. After learning about Kravchenko's death sentence, Chikatilo begins to kill people one by one. Almost all the bodies have eyes gouged out, stab wounds, rape, and some of the bodies of both girls and boys were missing genitals, breasts, nipples, and abdomens. The motive for all these crimes is the same: getting an orgasm. Criminologists analyse the remnants of semen on one of the bodies and establish the maniac as having the fourth blood group. This is the third and worst human error that will cause more than 20 people to die. His blood group was not the fourth, but the second. Because of this error, Chikatilo will be numerously released from the investigation, because for the investigators, the blood puzzle will not add up. The beast's diabolical look follows him everywhere. He leaves no witnesses or direct evidence. He could be sitting on the body, dismembering it, and 5 meters away from him, behind the bushes, people would be walking by. Hundreds of policemen and vigilantes patrolled trains, train stations, and the transit stations, but all in vain. Thousands of other criminals were detained, as well as dozens of stupid imitators who tried to take all the blame, but the brutal murders continued. The city was in a state of panic. More than 30 bodies were found, and the investigators asked themselves a very natural question: how in such a situation does the pervert manage to find new victims? It's simple. He didn't look like a maniac, dressed in a coat, grey suit, briefcase, modest tie, hat and glasses. Meeting mostly at bus stops and train stations, he approached people and started casual conversations. For example, when does the number 18 bus arrive? And there is a shortcut to another train track. Let's go and I'll show you. Children were lured to a forested area with sweets, or he suggested going with him to watch cartoons. He inspired confidence and spoke quietly and calmly. All the victims followed him voluntarily. This is the fourth human error, going with a strange man into the forest. This mistake cost all these people their lives. Most of the bodies were found in a forested area along the route of the Rostov-Novocherkassk train. In addition to Shakhty, Chikatilo also killed in the neighbouring towns. Novocherkassk, the population is 167,000. It produces mainline freight electric locomotives. The plant employs almost 10,000 people, one of whom was once Chikatilo. On August 17th, 1990, a man's body will be found here. More than 40 stab wounds will be counted on the body, and experts will later establish the man was castrated whilst he was still alive. City of Rostov-on-Don. At Rostov train stations, Chikatilo met people and brought them to the Aviator Park. Here he brutally killed at least 8 people. 1984, by the time more than 30 bodies of the victims of the maniac were found, Chikatilo came to the attention of investigators for a second time. At one of the stations in Rostov, those on the lookout for a maniac pay attention to him as an untypical and suspicious passenger. He wanders around the station aimlessly and accosts various people, mostly marginal types, aiming to make their acquaintance. They start to follow him and followed him all day. He molested people in the park, at bus stops, and clearly did not want to leave until someone joined him. He was arrested and was found to have a knife, Vaseline, and rope with him. He fully fit the description of the maniac, for which by that time the investigation was looking for several thousand people, but he was released because there was no direct evidence and the blood type did not match. They let him go and put him under surveillance, but that's only on paper, because from this day on he will kill 20 more people. This is the fifth human error. To do something on paper, but in fact to do nothing, shows negligence, due to the fact that in 1984, Chikatilo was released after 3 months of detention. He felt so much impunity that he began to look for victims right in the center of the city. They caught him only when an official came from Moscow and said that there was no other business in Russia except catching Satan. The search for the killer was so extensive that it was included in the books on criminology. Thousands of policemen were looking for him. At this railway station, Forestry, one of the task force approached a citizen coming out of the forest, asking him to show documents. It seemed strange to him that a person so unlike a mushroom picker was walking in the woods, and later he wrote a report about it. The next day, in 100 meters from this station, 2 mutilated bodies will be found, and then the chief investigator for the search for the maniac will be given a report which will sound the word that has become synonymous for us all with the horror, Chikatilo. His confessions began with the fact that he revealed the body of one of his victims, which the investigators still had not found. Here in the city cemetery of the city of Shakhty, he buried the body of Alexei Hobatov. Alexei's mother spent almost a year walking around Rostov stations and trains, showing everyone a photo of Alexei in the hope that someone had seen him. Once she showed a photo on the train to Chikatilo himself. At the inquest, she recognized him by the characteristic gesture with which he adjusted his glasses. At the trial, he will try to complain about a difficult childhood, plead that he is a Soviet citizen, feign mental illness, write appeals to the president, but all in vain. He was executed in this prison on the 11th of February 1994 with a shot to the head. People in this story made a series of monstrous mistakes that killed dozens of innocent people. Every year in Russia, tens and sometimes hundreds of thousands of people die because of someone's mistakes. Mistakes of investigators, mistakes in medical procedures, or banal mistakes behind the wheel. Every person, without knowing it, at least once in their life, has been in a situation where people can die because of their mistake. Over the past year, we have reduced by 224,000. This is the population of a city like Shakhty. care of yourself and your loved ones so that there are fewer such films.